In the dazzling realm of the ultra-rich, appearances reign supreme. A humble waitress is often perceived as merely a shadow, present only to serve and be swiftly forgotten. Yet, what transpires when this very shadow possesses knowledge exceeding that of everyone else in the room? Within the confines of one of the city's most prestigious restaurants, a young woman named Kimberly endured the disdain of arrogant millionaires who viewed her as nothing more than a subservient figure. However, they remained oblivious to the silent, powerful figure observing them from a corner table. His arrival commanded absolute silence throughout the entire establishment. When he finally broke his silence, his tone remained measured. He simply posed a question so profound that it laid bare all of their carefully constructed lies. The Gilded Lantern was more than just a place to dine. It was an arena where status was served on a silver platter. The atmosphere hung heavy with the intoxicating blend of truffle oil, aged leather, and the subtle metallic fragrance of generations of wealth. Patrons engaged in hushed, self-assured conversations, their laughter meticulously controlled to avoid any hint of vulgarity. It was a veritable cathedral of affluence, and Kimberly Evans existed as one of its most inconspicuous members. At the age of 24, Kimberly had perfected the art of blending into the background. She navigated the plush velvet booths with practiced grace, her footsteps barely audible on the thick Persian carpets. Her attire, consisting of a flawlessly pressed black blouse and precisely tailored trousers, was impeccable, yet it served as a veil of invisibility. To the restaurant's clientele, she wasn't Kimberly, the woman who dedicated her evenings to devouring art history books from the public library and sketching intricate architectural designs on napkins. She was simply a pair of hands, there to replenish a water glass or clear away a finished plate. On this particular Tuesday evening, the atmosphere crackled with an unusual intensity. Table 7 was occupied by Brian Chun and his entourage. Chun, a prominent real estate developer, was a ubiquitous presence on billboards across the city, his smile both charming and predatory. He had amassed his fortune by demolishing historic buildings to erect towering monoliths of glass and steel, and he exuded the unwavering arrogance of a man who believed he was shaping the future. His companions, consisting of 2 other men and their partners, mirrored his boisterous energy, their laughter bordering on excessive for the Gilded Lantern's revered tranquility. Kimberly approached their table, her silver tray perfectly balanced. "Your next course, Mr. Chun," she announced, her voice soft yet distinct. Chun didn't even bother to acknowledge her presence. He was engrossed in a story about a hostile takeover, punctuating his sentences with aggressive gestures. As Kimberly carefully placed a delicate plate of seared scallops before one of his friends, Chun's wildly flailing hand struck the edge of her tray, causing a single, gleaming silver fork to clatter loudly onto the floor. The sound resonated like a gunshot in the hushed room, instantly drawing everyone's attention. Chun abruptly stopped mid-sentence, his face turning crimson with anger. He glanced down at the fork, then up at Kimberly, his eyes filled with theatrical disdain. "Seriously?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Can you not even manage to carry a tray properly? Do they hire just anyone off the street here?" A wave of cruel snickers rippled around his table. Kimberly's face flushed with heat, a deep, painful blush that began at her neck and quickly spread to her temples. "My apologies, sir. It was an accident." "And," Chun repeated, drawing out the word. He gingerly picked up the fork with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. "This is a $500 plate establishment. We expect a certain level of competence, not clumsiness." Kimberly bent down to retrieve the fork, her movements stiff with humiliation. She could feel the eyes of the entire restaurant boring into her. She noticed Mr. Henderson, the restaurant manager, hurrying over, his face a mask of anxious supplication. Henderson was a man who measured his worth by the net worth of the nearest customer. "Mr. Chun, is there a problem?" Henderson inquired, his voice dripping with obsequious concern. He completely ignored Kimberly, who was now standing with the offending fork in her hand. "Your staff, Henderson," Chun said, waving a dismissive hand at Kimberly. spilling things, making a racket. It's disruptive. Frankly, it's unprofessional. I'm so terribly sorry, sir. It will not happen again, Henderson said before turning a venomous glare on Kimberly. Get a new fork and be more careful. We have standards here. Yes, Mr. Henderson, Kimberly whispered. She retreated toward the kitchen, the weight of a dozen judgmental stares pressing down on her. She knew it was Chen's fault, that his wild gesturing had caused the incident. But in this world, the customer wasn't just right. He was infallible. The waitress was always to blame. Back at the table, Chun was preening, reveling in the power play. You see, he said to his friends, you have to be firm. It's the only language these people understand. No ambition, no drive. That's why they end up in jobs like this. One of his friends, a man named Marcus Thorne, chuckled. You'd think they'd at least teach them to walk and carry something at the same time. Kimberly returned with a polished fork on a small velvet cloth, her expression carefully neutral. She placed it beside Chen's plate, her hands steady despite the tremor she felt inside. She had spent years cultivating a calm exterior, a necessary shield against the casual cruelties of her job. She needed this job desperately. Her mother's medical bills had become a mountain of debt. She was slowly, painstakingly chipping away at it, one demeaning shift at a time. Her dreams of studying art history at the university felt more distant with each passing day. As she turned to leave, Chun called out again. Wait! Kimberly paused, her back to him. The painting, he said, gesturing to the enormous canvas that dominated the far wall. It was a dramatic, moody seascape, depicting dark waves crashing against jagged rocks under a stormy sky. Tell me about it. I'm considering buying it. It was a test, a new way to humiliate her. He assumed she would know nothing, that her knowledge was limited to the difference between Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc. Kimberly turned slowly. She looked at the painting, a piece she knew intimately. She had spent countless slow hours studying its every brush stroke, feeling the artist's emotion in the turbulent depiction of the sea. It is the tempest's fury, sir, she began, her voice gaining a sliver of confidence. It's a mid-19th century piece from the Romantic period, noted for its use of impasto to create the texture of the sea foam. Chun cut her off with a dismissive laugh. Spare me the art class lecture. I wasn't asking for the plaque description. I was testing you. See, a little bit of knowledge probably fed to you by Henderson so you can sound smart to the tourists. He waved her away again. Go on, run along. The adults are talking. Humiliation, cold and sharp, pierced through her carefully constructed armor. She retreated once more, her shoulders slumped. From across the room, she watched them, their laughter echoing in the opulent space. They saw a clumsy waitress, an empty vessel. They had no idea they were the ones who were truly blind. Just as the last of Chen's mocking laughter subsided, a subtle shift occurred in the restaurant's atmosphere. It began at the entrance, a wave of sudden silence that rolled inward, extinguishing conversations table by table. The maitre d', a famously unflappable man named Julian, seemed to stand straighter, his professional composure tinged with something akin to reverence. Through the grand archway stepped a man who commanded attention without demanding it. He was tall and lean, dressed in a bespoke suit of such a deep charcoal gray that it seemed to absorb the light around him. His features were sharp and aristocratic, framed by a neatly trimmed beard, and his eyes held a calm, penetrating intelligence. He was flanked by two other men, equally well-dressed, but clearly subordinate, their gazes constantly scanning the room. This was Sheikh Khaled al-Hamad. His name was not one shouted from the covers of tabloids, but it was whispered with awe in the boardrooms of global corporations and the auction houses of London and Geneva. His family's wealth was ancient, rooted in oil and expanded through visionary investments in technology, sustainable energy, and, most personally, the preservation of global art and culture. Mr. Henderson moved so quickly he nearly tripped over a chair. He arrived at the Sheikh's side, bowing slightly, his earlier arrogance replaced by a feigned nervous deference. Your Excellency, Henderson stammered, his voice an octave higher than usual. "It is an honor. We were not expecting you this evening. Your usual table is ready, of course." Sheikh Khalid gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Thank you, Henderson. My plans changed." His voice was a low, resonant baritone with a crisp, precise accent that hinted at a world-class education. He spoke English perfectly, yet each word seemed carefully chosen, carrying its own specific weight. He and his entourage were led to the most secluded table in the restaurant, a corner booth that offered a panoramic view of the room while maintaining an air of privacy. As he moved, the Sheikh's eyes swept across the space, not with the idle curiosity of a diner, but with the keen, analytical gaze of a collector. He noted the Belgian tapestries, the Venetian glass chandeliers, and his eyes lingered for a moment on the large seascape, the Tempest's fury, before he took his seat. Kimberly was tasked with serving him. Normally, a VIP of this caliber would be handled by Henderson himself or the most senior waiter, but the section was hers. As she approached the table, she felt a fresh wave of anxiety. Her hands were still trembling slightly from her encounter with Brian Chun. She took a deep, steadying breath, reminding herself of the simple mechanics of her job. Take the order, serve the drinks, be invisible. "Good evening, Your Excellency," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She placed the leather-bound menus on the table without looking up. "Good evening," the Sheikh replied. The calm authority in his voice made her instinctively raise her eyes. He was looking directly at her, not through her. His gaze wasn't judgmental or dismissive. It was simply observant. It was as if he could see the frayed nerves beneath her professional facade. For a fleeting second, Kimberly had the unnerving feeling that this man saw more than anyone else in the room. He and his companions ordered quietly and efficiently, requesting nothing more than sparkling water to drink. There was no fanfare, no loud pronouncements of preference. Their quiet dignity stood in stark contrast to the performative arrogance of Brian Chen's table. From his vantage point, Chun had not missed the arrival of the Sheikh. He recognized him immediately. The presence of Sheikh Khalid al-Hamad was an opportunity, an association. Even a brief conversation with a man of that stature could open doors that Chen's new money could only knock on. Well, Chun said to his friends, leaning in conspiratorially. "Look who it is. That's Khalid al-Hamad." He cleared his throat. "Probably closing another multi-billion-dollar deal." He straightened his tie, a predatory gleam in his eye. "You watch, a man like that respects power. He respects men who get things done." For the next hour, Chen's behavior intensified. He began speaking louder, dropping the names of politicians and CEOs. He pontificated on the global economy and art investments, his pronouncements a mixture of buzzwords and blatant inaccuracies. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to capture the Sheikh's attention, to signal that he, Brian Chun, belonged in the same rarefied air. The Sheikh, however, seemed completely oblivious. He conversed in low tones with his associates, his focus entirely on his own table. He never once glanced in Chen's direction. Kimberly moved back and forth between her tables, a silent observer of the competing dramas. She felt the oppressive weight of Chen's ego and the gravitational pull of the Sheikh's quiet power. When she was near Chen's table, she felt small and clumsy. When she served the Sheikh, she felt seen. He would offer a quiet thank you for each item she placed down, his eyes briefly meeting hers with an expression of polite acknowledgement. It was a small gesture, but in her world, it was a profound act of respect. She refilled Sheikh Khalid's water glass, her hand moving with a newfound steadiness. He had noticed her distress earlier. She was sure of it. She had seen a flicker of something in his eyes when Chan had berated her. Not pity, but a kind of thoughtful appraisal. While the rest of the room saw a bumbling waitress, perhaps this powerful stranger saw something else entirely. Or perhaps, she thought with a sigh, she was just projecting her own desperate wish to be seen as more than what she was. The more Sheikh Khalid ignored him, the more desperate Brian Chun became. His ego, a fragile and bloated thing, could not stand being overlooked. He saw the Sheikh's quiet dinner as a personal affront, a challenge to his own perceived importance in the hierarchy of the Gilded Lantern. He needed to reassert his dominance, and he decided the best way to do that was to amplify his performance. He began to hold court, his voice rising in volume, ensuring his words would carry across the room to the Sheikh's corner booth. He shifted the topic from business to culture, the last refuge of the insecure intellectual. "The problem with modern art," Chun declared loudly, swirling the wine in his glass, "is that it lacks soul. It's all shock value. Give me a classic masterpiece any day. Something with history, something with meaning." He glanced towards the Sheikh's table. There was no reaction. Frustrated, Chun turned his attention back to the large seascape on the wall, the same one he had used to taunt Kimberly. It would be his stage. "Take this painting, for instance," he announced. "A perfect example. A layman sees a pretty picture of a boat in a storm, but a man with a discerning eye," here he puffed out his chest, "sees more. I see the struggle of man against nature, the raw, untamed power of the elements." The artist, likely some obscure Dutchman from the 17th century, was clearly making a statement about the futility of human endeavor. Kimberly, standing by a service station nearby, had to physically restrain herself from reacting. A Dutchman? The impasto technique, the emotional turbulence, it was quintessentially romantic, likely British or German, and from the 19th century. His analysis was a caricature of art criticism, a word salad of clichés. One of Chen's friends, eager to play his part, added, "You have a real eye, Brian. I would have just said it looked old." "It takes years of study, Marcus," Chun said with false modesty. "Visits to the Louvre, the Prado. You develop an instinct for these things." "Henderson," he bellowed, snapping his fingers. Mr. Henderson scurried over, his smile strained. "Yes, Mr. Chun? This painting, I assume it's for sale. I'm thinking of acquiring it for my penthouse lobby. It would make a powerful statement." This was his checkmate. He was publicly declaring his intent to purchase the largest, most significant object in the room, a clear display of financial power meant to impress the Sheikh. "Ah, yes, the painting," Henderson said, wringing his hands. "It is a magnificent piece. The owner of the restaurant acquired it from a private estate sale some years ago. I'm not certain if it's for sale, but for you, Mr. Chun, I can certainly inquire." "Do that," Chun commanded. He leaned back in his chair, a smug look on his face, and finally turned his gaze directly to Sheikh Khalid's table. The Sheikh was in the middle of taking a sip of water. He paused, his glass halfway to his lips, and for the first time that evening, his eyes met Brian Chen's across the room. There was no warmth in his gaze, only a cool, unreadable stillness. The direct eye contact emboldened Chun. He felt he had finally broken through. He saw it as an invitation. "Your Excellency," Chun called out, his voice anxiously familiar. "A magnificent piece, wouldn't you agree? A testament to the enduring power of classic art." The entire restaurant fell silent. Addressing another table so directly, especially one occupied by a man of Sheikh Khalid's stature, was a severe breach of etiquette. It was presumptuous and crass. Sheikh Khalid slowly lowered his water glass. He did not reply. He simply held Chen's gaze for a long, uncomfortable moment. The silence stretched, thick with social tension. Chen's confident smile began to falter. He had expected an affirmation, a conversation, an acknowledgement of his status as a fellow connoisseur. He was getting nothing but a silent, piercing stare. Feeling his power play backfiring, Chen panicked. Like any bully, his instinct was to deflect his own humiliation by inflicting it on someone weaker. His eyes darted around and landed on Kimberly, who was frozen by the service station. "Waitress!" he barked, his voice sharp with misplaced anger. "More bread. Now, are you deaf? Do your job." The outburst was ugly and jarring. It was a desperate, clumsy attempt to regain control, to show the room and the Sheikh that he was still a man who gave orders and was obeyed. Kimberly flinched, but years of training took over. "Yes, sir. Right away," she mumbled, turning to head for the kitchen. But as she took a step, Another voice cut through the tense silence. A quiet, calm, yet unyielding voice that came from the corner booth. Wait! It was the Sheikh. He hadn't raised his voice, but the word carried an undeniable authority that stopped Kimberly in her tracks. It stopped Henderson from scurrying. It even stopped Chun mid-sentence. Everyone turned to Sheikh Khaled al-Hamad. He was no longer looking at Chun. His gaze was now fixed on the painting on the wall. His expression one of intense, unblinking focus. The performance was over. The real examination was about to begin. Sheikh Khaled rose slowly from his seat. The movement was fluid and deliberate, drawing the attention of every person in the restaurant. He walked towards the grand seascape, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. He stopped a few feet from the canvas, his hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted in contemplation. Brian Chun watched, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. He had intended to use the painting as a prop for his own ego, but the Sheikh had now taken center stage, and his silent contemplation of the artwork felt far more authentic than Chen's loud pronouncements. Still, Chun clung to the belief that this was his moment. The Sheikh was clearly impressed by the same things he was. After a full minute of silence, Sheikh Khaled turned, not to Chen, but to the room at large. His eyes, however, seemed to settle on the table of self-proclaimed experts. Mr. Chen. The Sheikh began, his voice even and measured, devoid of any discernible emotion. You appreciate this piece. You speak of its soul, of the artist's statement on the futility of human endeavor. Chun puffed up, beaming. Indeed, Your Excellency. It's quite obvious to the trained eye. Then you must have noticed the details. The Sheikh continued, his voice as smooth as silk. He gestured toward the painting. A fascinating work. The artist's control of light is remarkable, especially the way the lightning flash illuminates the ship's mast. The romantic style is clear, but there is an incongruity, isn't there? Something that doesn't quite fit the period you suggest. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. The room was so quiet that the faint clinking of ice in a distant water glass sounded like a chime. Look closely, the Sheikh invited, his gaze sweeping over Chan and his friends. In the lower left corner, almost lost in the spray of the waves against the rocks, there is a small, barely visible symbol painted into the stone. It is not the artist's signature, which is on the right. It is something else entirely. Everyone squinted at the painting. From a distance, it was impossible to see. Chan and his friends leaned forward, their expressions shifting from smug confidence to confused concentration. Sheikh Khaled's gaze hardened almost imperceptibly. My question is this, he said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more intense. What is that symbol? And, more importantly, what is its precise historical significance to the vessel depicted in this painting? A true connoisseur, one who understands the history, and not just the soul, would surely know. The question landed in the center of the room like a stone dropped into a still pond. It was not a casual inquiry. It was a scalpel designed to cut through layers of pretense and expose the truth beneath. It was specific, academic, and deeply esoteric. It was a question that could not be answered with bluster or cliches about the struggle of man. It required actual knowledge. A wave of panic washed over Brian Chen's face. He stared at the painting, his eyes wide. He could see a faint smudge in the corner the Sheikh had indicated, but it was meaningless to him, a symbol. The ship's history. He had invented his entire analysis out of thin air. His trained eye was a complete fraud. He cleared his throat, trying to buy time. Well, that's a very specific detail. In a work of this scale, such minor elements are often just artistic flourishes. They don't necessarily have a literal meaning. The Sheikh's expression remained unchanged. On the contrary, he said coolly, in this case, the symbol is the entire key to understanding the painting. Without it, the piece is merely a dramatic seascape. With it, it becomes a historical record. The silence returned, heavier and more suffocating than before. The Sheikh's gaze remained on Chun, expectant. He wasn't going to let him off the hook. Chen's friends fidgeted, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Marcus Thorne suddenly found the pattern on his plate to be intensely fascinating. Mr. Henderson looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. He, too, had praised the painting to countless wealthy patrons, reciting a few canned lines about its beauty. He had no idea about any symbol. Brian Chen was trapped. His bluff had been called on the grandest possible stage, in front of the one man he desperately wanted to impress. The sweat began to bead on his forehead. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had nothing, no clever deflection, no witty retort. He was utterly and completely exposed. The Sheikh's question hung in the air unanswered. The entire restaurant waited, watching the slow, painful humiliation of a man who just moments before had been the king of his tiny, gilded world. And in that silence, everyone finally understood. The Sheikh hadn't been ignoring Chun. He had been taking his measure, and he had found him wanting. The silence in the gilded lantern was no longer polite or respectful. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Every patron in the room, from the quiet couple in the corner to the boisterous group of bankers near the bar, was now a spectator to Brian Chen's public unraveling. The Sheikh's question, so precise and academic, had become a weapon, and Chun was bleeding confidence on the Persian rug. He licked his lips, his eyes darting from the painting to the Sheikh, then to his friends, silently pleading for an answer. Assist that would never materialize. Marcus Thorne and the rest of the group stared intently at their bread rolls, suddenly reluctant to be associated with their leader's spectacular and embarrassing downfall. It's probably a guild mark, Chun stammered, desperately grasping at any explanation, no matter how flimsy. Or perhaps it's the insignia of the ship's owner. These details often get lost to the ravages of time. It would require some serious research in maritime archives. He was doing his best to sound knowledgeable, hoping to suggest that the question was merely obscure, not entirely beyond the grasp of a man with his supposed intellect. The Sheikh listened with an unnerving stillness, not moving a muscle. When Chen finally finished his pathetic attempt to bluff his way through, a faint, almost pitying smile touched the Sheikh's lips. A guild mark, he repeated the two words, dripping with a gentle but unmistakable dismissal. An interesting, though ultimately incorrect, hypothesis. The symbol has absolutely nothing to do with any guild, and it is far from being lost to history, I assure you. It is, in fact, quite well documented, if one knows where to look. The finality of the Sheikh's tone was like a judge's gavel coming down hard. The verdict was in. Brian Chun was a fraud, plain and simple. The flush on Chen's face deepened to a dark, mottled crimson. The smug smirk he had been wearing all evening had vanished completely, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure and utter humiliation. The air of power he had been projecting was nothing but a cheap illusion, and Sheikh Khaled had shattered it with a single, effortless question. Mr. Henderson, seeing his prized customer being so thoroughly dismantled and embarrassed, felt a surge of panic rising within him. He knew he had to do something, anything, to smooth things over and somehow rescue the rapidly deteriorating situation. Well, Henderson interjected with a forced, brittle laugh that sounded incredibly fake. Seems you've stumped us all, Your Excellency. A true mystery indeed, perhaps one for the art historians. Now, if I could perhaps interest you all in our dessert menu. The Sheikh turned his cool, piercing gaze directly on Henderson. The manager's pathetic attempt to diffuse the mounting tension withered and died under the sheer weight of that unwavering stare. I am not interested in dessert, Henderson, the Sheikh said, his voice quiet but firm with a steely edge. I am interested in the answer. I am interested in finding out who in this room truly appreciates this work for what it is, not for what they merely imagine it to be. His eyes swept the room once again, issuing a silent challenge to everyone present. He looked at the other diners, who quickly averted their gazes, suddenly finding something intensely fascinating about their water glasses or silverware. He looked at Henderson, who was now visibly sweating, his carefully cultivated composure cracking under the pressure. His gaze passed over Chen's table, where the four men were now shrinking into their expensive suits, desperately trying to become invisible. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. The scene had transformed in an instant from a simple, elegant dinner into a stark morality play, with the stakes being far higher than anyone had anticipated. Chun, who had built his entire identity on a foundation of arrogance and condescension, was now being held accountable for his pretense and shallow knowledge. His mockery of Kimberly earlier in the evening, his sneering dismissal of her as unprofessional, now seemed ludicrously hypocritical, the words echoing back to haunt him. He had postured as a man of substance and taste, only to be exposed as a hollow shell, all surface and no depth. He finally broke under the pressure. He threw his napkin down on the table with a trembling hand, the crisp linen landing with a soft thud. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, his voice raspy with shame and anger. "I didn't come here to be interrogated." He pushed his chair back from the table, the legs scraping loudly against the polished floor, the sound amplified in the sudden silence. "We're leaving," he announced abruptly to his friends, his face burning with humiliation. Without another word, he turned and strode towards the exit, his head down, his posture defeated, his shoulders slumped with shame. His friends scrambled to follow, a pathetic procession of disgraced sycophants desperate to escape the awkward situation. They didn't even wait for the check, eager to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the scene of Chen's public humiliation. As they passed the service station, Chen's eyes met Kimberly's for a fraction of a second. In that fleeting glance, she saw no remorse, no hint of regret, only a flash of raw, impotent hatred burning in his eyes. He was deeply humiliated, and in his twisted mind, it was somehow all her fault, a convenient scapegoat for his own failings. The room exhaled a collective, quiet sigh of relief as the door swung shut behind them, effectively sealing off their dramatic exit from the rest of the diners. The oppressive atmosphere created by Chen's overblown ego had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the Sheikh's question remained hanging in the silent, expectant air, an unanswered challenge. The painting, the Tempest's fury, seemed to loom even larger now, its secret still safely locked away within its layers of paint and canvas. The mystery was still unsolved, or so everyone else in the room thought. With Brian Chen's graceless and abrupt exit, the dense fabric of tension that had enveloped the gilded lantern did not simply dissipate into nothingness. Instead, it subtly changed, transforming from the acute discomfort of a public shaming into a lingering, mystified silence, thick with unspoken questions. The remaining patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their previously hushed conversations from earlier in the evening now entirely extinguished, leaving the air heavy and still. They were no longer simply diners enjoying an expensive meal, but an audience held captive by the unresolved drama that had just played out before them. The Sheikh's insightful question, like a complex puzzle thrown into their midst, still hung in the air, unanswered and echoing in their minds. All eyes were now focused on the man who had posed the question and on the captivating painting that held its secret, a silent battle of wits and knowledge being waged. Kimberly stood quietly by her service station, feeling almost like a ghost in the well-oiled machine that was the gilded lantern. Yet her mind was a whirlwind of frantic, brilliant light, ideas and thoughts colliding and swirling like a storm. She knew the answer to the Sheikh's question. The knowledge was not a vague or hazy recollection from a book, but a living, breathing thing inside her, fully formed and ready to be unleashed. It was a complete narrative, a vibrant tapestry of history, trade routes, and artistic legacy that she had painstakingly pieced together over countless quiet hours spent in the library. The star, the Al-Jaim family, the Najmat Albert J. M. W. Turner. The names and facts swirled around in her head, clamoring for release, a symphony of knowledge demanding to be heard. But then, a sudden wave of icy fear washed over her, chilling her to the bone. To speak up, to reveal what she knew, would be an act of professional suicide. She was sure of it. She could see it playing out in her mind, the inevitable consequences laid out before her. Mr. Henderson's apoplectic rage, the condescending smirks from the wealthy patrons, the utter humiliation of being dismissed as a pretentious, overreaching servant. Chen's sneering voice replayed in her thoughts, echoing in her memory. Spare me the art class lecture. She desperately needed this job. It was a soul-crushing, thankless role. She knew that all too well, but it was also the thin black lines separating her from solvency and utter financial disaster. Her mother's weary face flashed in her mind. The mounting pile of medical bills lying on the kitchen table. The constant look of worry etched in her eyes. This job was not about pursuing dreams or passions. It was about basic survival, plain and simple. Silence was survival, she told herself. Invisibility was her shield, her only protection against the judgments and expectations of the world. And yet, the imposed silence felt terribly wrong, a betrayal of something deep inside her. It was a vacuum where a beautiful truth should be allowed to flourish. She looked at the painting again, The Tempest's Fury, a masterpiece being tragically misunderstood and misrepresented, its story unheard. It felt like a personal insult, a desecration of the artist's genius, and the incredible history locked within the very fibers of the canvas. She remembered the day she had stumbled upon the key to the puzzle, tucked away in a brittle, leather-bound art journal in the most neglected corner of the public library, a place most people wouldn't even think to look. She remembered the electric thrill that had shot through her as she connected the obscure reference to the ALJ trading dynasty with the long-forgotten legend of Turner's lost seascape, a moment of pure, solitary discovery, a secret joy that belonged only to her. To keep it locked away now, to deny its truth, felt like a betrayal of that joy, a betrayal of the very passion that gave her life meaning beyond the endless cycle of serving and clearing tables. She glanced at Sheikh Khalid. He was still standing before the painting, his posture one of deep contemplation and quiet respect. There was no arrogance in his stance, no smug satisfaction in having stumped the room with his question. There was only a profound, almost mournful sense of inquiry, a genuine desire to understand. He wasn't playing a game of intellectual superiority. He was genuinely seeking an answer, searching for a truth that he suspected was there, hidden beneath the surface. That look of earnest searching was the tipping point for Kimberly. It was clear to her now that he wasn't simply asking the room full of millionaires to stroke his ego. He was asking the painting itself to reveal its secrets, and Kimberly felt with a certainty that defied all logic and fear that she was its chosen emissary, the one meant to speak for it. Her fear did not vanish entirely, but her passion for the truth rose to meet it, overshadowing the fear with its intensity. For a brief, clarifying moment, the potential consequences seemed far less important than the truth itself, the need to share this hidden history outweighing any personal risk. Taking a breath so shallow it barely filled her lungs, she pushed off from the service station, setting her plan in motion. The first step was the hardest, a severance from the perceived safety of her designated role as a waitress. The plush carpet seemed to suck at the soles of her sensible shoes, trying to hold her back, to keep her in her place. Every eye in the room swiveled to follow her movement, the sound of countless pairs of eyes turning in unison. The low murmur of the patrons, which had begun to slowly build again, died instantly, leaving the room in complete silence. A woman at a nearby table lowered her wine glass, her mouth slightly agape, her eyes wide with curiosity. Kimberly felt the weight of their collective gaze like a physical pressure, a palpable force pushing against her. She kept her eyes fixed on the Sheikh's back, using it as a guiding light, a lighthouse in a sea of judgment and uncertainty. She stopped a few feet behind him, close enough to speak but far enough to maintain a respectful distance. Her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles were white, a physical manifestation of the inner turmoil she was experiencing. "Your Excellency," she began, her voice coming out as a fragile whisper, thin and reedy, barely audible above the pounding of her heart. It was the voice of a servant, hesitant and apologetic, accustomed to deferring to those of higher status. Mr. Henderson, who had been hovering near the kitchen entrance like a panicked ghost, jolted into action, his eyes wide with alarm. "Kimberly," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper that somehow carried across the silent room, sharp and dangerous. "What in God's name do you think you're doing? Get back to your station now before you cause any more trouble." She ignored him, focusing all of her attention on the Sheikh. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, threatening to burst from her chest. But a strange calm was beginning to settle over her, a sense of acceptance and resignation. She had already stepped off the cliff. She might as well try to fly, to see if she could actually soar above the limitations that had been placed on her. She cleared her throat, took another steadying breath, and spoke again, projecting her voice with more conviction. This time, her voice was clearer, steadier, resonating with newfound confidence. "The symbol," she said, looking past the Sheikh to the dark corner of the canvas where the star knot was subtly hidden, "is not a guild mark." Sheikh Khalid turned around slowly, his movements deliberate and graceful. His face was a mask of aristocratic neutrality, carefully composed and unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, focused, and intensely curious, betraying his genuine interest. He did not dismiss her or interrupt her. He simply waited patiently, giving her the space to continue, to elaborate on her statement. It was all the encouragement she needed, a silent invitation to share her knowledge. "It's a star knot," she elaborated, her voice gaining strength and confidence as she stepped into the comforting realm of her expertise. "An ancient symbol, yes, but its specific design, the 7 points, the intricately interwoven pattern, is the unique emblem of the Aljaim trading family of Muscat, dating back to the early 19th century. As she spoke, she moved forward, closing the distance between them until she was standing beside him, an equal before the canvas, her voice ringing with authority. She was no longer a waitress addressing a dignitary. She was one scholar sharing a discovery with another, united by their mutual love of history and art. The Aljaim family built their considerable fortune on the frankincense trade, which was a very lucrative enterprise in that region. Their ships were legendary, known throughout the ports of the Arabian Sea as the stars of the Gulf, symbols of prosperity and power. They commissioned a series of paintings to document their most prized vessels, painted by the finest European artists of the day, sparing no expense in their pursuit of artistic excellence. "This painting," she said, her voice now filled with a quiet, confident authority that commanded attention, "is the last and most famous of that series, the culmination of their artistic patronage." She pointed a delicate, trembling finger towards the ship being battered by the storm in the painting's foreground. "That isn't just a random vessel caught in a tempest. That is the Najmat Alber, the Star of the Sea. It was the family's flagship, their most prized possession, captained by Said bin Sultan Al-Jaim himself, the patriarch of the Al-Jaim family. It was tragically lost in a catastrophic typhoon off the southern coast of Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, in the autumn of 1848, during the height of the monsoon season. There were very few survivors, and the loss of the ship was a devastating blow to the family and their fortunes. The entire room was now listening, completely rapt, hanging on her every word. The incredible story was unfolding, rich with detail and historical context, coming from the most unlikely of sources, the quiet waitress who had been silently observing them all evening. The artist was Joseph Mallard William Turner, she stated directly, refuting Chen's ignorant guess of an obscure Dutch painter and setting the record straight with unwavering certainty. The Al-Jaim family had commissioned him to paint the Najmat Alber posthumously, as a memorial to the lost ship and its crew, based on the harrowing accounts of the sailors who miraculously survived the disaster. The art world has long considered this commission a legend, whispered about but never confirmed, as the painting was never publicly shown and was believed to have been lost or destroyed. But the star knot is the proof, the irrefutable evidence that this is indeed the lost Turner masterpiece. It was the family's private mark, their seal of ownership, a symbol of their legacy. Turner would only have included it at their specific and adamant request, a guarantee of authenticity for future generations. She finished her explanation, her chest rising and falling with the last of the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had said it all, revealing her secret world of books and journals, exposing the depths of her knowledge. Her carefully guarded passion was no longer a secret. It was laid bare in the opulent dining room of the Gilded Lantern for all to see and judge. The silence that followed was different from the silence that had preceded her revelation. It was a silence of awe, a silence born of genuine respect and admiration. Mr. Henderson stared at her, his face a comical picture of shock and confusion, his mouth agape. The other patrons looked from Kimberly to the painting and back again, their expressions completely transformed from bored indifference to wide-eyed astonishment. Sheikh Khaled remained motionless for a long moment, his eyes fixed intently on her, taking in everything she had said. The cool, appraising mask had completely fallen away, replaced by an expression of profound, unbridled astonishment and disbelief. Slowly, he turned back to the canvas and walked right up to it, leaning in close to examine the lower left corner, where the faint symbol of the star knot was hidden in the dark, churning waves. He studied it intently for what felt like an eternity, his brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, he straightened up and turned to face her again. The look in his eyes was one of deep, penetrating wonder and amazement, a mixture of awe and gratitude. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost reverent, laced with an emotion that no one else in the room could quite decipher. A subtle blend of disbelief and overwhelming joy. How? He asked, the single word carrying the weight of 100 unspoken questions. A lifetime of hidden history yearning to be understood. How in all the world did you know that? The Sheikh's question, soft yet profound, seemed to absorb all the remaining air in the gilded lantern, leaving everyone breathless. It was a question that went far beyond mere curiosity. It was a demand for an origin story, an inquiry into the very nature of a mind that could hold such treasures of knowledge and insight. While the hands were occupied with clearing plates and refilling water glasses, Kimberly felt the last vestiges of her waitress persona dissolve under his intense, wondering gaze. For the first time in years, she felt she could speak not as an employee, defined by her job title, but as herself, as the person she truly was. I don't just clear tables, Your Excellency, she began, her voice finding a new resonant timbre, no longer hesitant or apologetic. I read in my spare time on my days off. That's my real life, the life that truly matters to me. The city library is my sanctuary, my escape from the everyday. Not the bright, modern sections upstairs with the computers and the new releases, but the archives in the basement, where the air smells of dust and decaying paper, where history whispers from the shelves. That's where I found it, where I pieced everything together. She looked at the painting, but her mind was seeing the library's dimly lit basement, the rows of towering shelves, the forgotten corners where she spent countless hours immersed in books. I came across a footnote in a biography of Turner, almost an afterthought, about a lost commission for an Arabian prince. It was a footnote to a footnote, really, a detail that most historians had dismissed as insignificant or unreliable, but it intrigued me, it sparked my curiosity. I started digging, cross-referencing shipping manifests and family histories from the 19th century, following every lead, no matter how small. I spent weeks piecing it all together, connecting the dots. I found the Aljaim family's name in an old trade ledger, listed among the merchants who traded in frankincense and spices. And then I found a reference to their family emblem in a privately published journal from an art collector in the 1920s. Finally, I found a detailed description of this very painting and a sketch of the family's unique star knot emblem. The moment I saw this canvas on the wall on my first day working here, I knew instantly, deep down, that this was it. But I had no real proof, and I had no one to tell, no one who would listen to a waitress with a wild theory about a lost masterpiece. A faint, sad smile touched her lips, a fleeting acknowledgement of the absurdity of the situation. This knowledge, it has always felt like a beautiful, useless thing, a secret garden I tended to alone, a source of personal joy but with no practical application. To finally be able to share it, to have someone understand its meaning and appreciate its significance, that is everything to me. The Sheikh listened to every word, his expression shifting from astonishment to something deeper, a quiet recognition of her innate intelligence and passion. He saw not just the facts she possessed, but the lonely, passionate journey she had undertaken to acquire them, the dedication and perseverance that had fueled her quest for knowledge. He too knew the quiet companionship of old books and the solitary thrill of connecting the disparate threads of history, the joy of discovery. A secret garden, he repeated softly, the words resonating with him, a shared understanding passing between them. But knowledge like this was never meant to be kept in secret, Miss Evans. It is meant to be shared, to be illuminated. It is a beacon, and tonight you have shown it across a sea of 70 years, bringing light to a long-forgotten story. He took a slow, deliberate breath, his own composure seeming to crack for the first time, revealing a glimpse of the deep emotions hidden beneath his aristocratic facade. A profound, deep-seated emotion surfaced in his eyes, a mixture of sorrow and joy. The Aljaim family of Muscat, that was my mother's family. The captain of the Najmat Alber, said bin Sultan Aljaim, was my great-great-grandfather. A collective audible gasp rippled through the restaurant, a wave of shock and disbelief spreading through the room. The story, already cinematic in its scope and drama, had just become an epic, a personal saga spanning generations. The historical had become deeply personal, connecting the past to the present in a profound and unexpected way. My grandmother used to tell me stories of the great ship, the Najmat Alber, the Sheikh continued, his voice now thick with the weight of cherished memories, his gaze far away. She spoke of it not merely as a vessel, but as a living entity, a symbol of our family's pride and heritage. Its loss was a deep wound that never truly healed, a scar etched on the heart of our family history. And the painting, it was our last tangible link to that legacy, the last physical reminder of our ancestors' achievements. It was shipped to London for safekeeping during the early years of the 20th century, when the political situation in the Middle East became increasingly unstable, and then it vanished without a trace during the Blitz, lost to the chaos and destruction of the war. My family has spent a considerable fortune over the past 7 decades searching for it, employing art historians, private investigators, and even psychics, leaving no stone unturned. We followed dozens of false leads, chasing rumors from a private vault in Zurich to a dusty attic in Scotland, each time hoping that we had finally found it. Eventually, we reluctantly gave up hope, resigning ourselves to the belief that it had been turned to ash, its memory surviving only in our stories and family legends. He turned his gaze back to the tumultuous sea depicted on the canvas, his eyes fixed on the churning waves and stormy skies. But he was clearly seeing something else, a connection to his ancestors, a piece of his own soul miraculously restored. And here it hangs, hanging in a restaurant in New York City, unnoticed and unappreciated. And the only person in the world who recognized it for what it truly is you, a waitress working here, someone with no formal training in art history but with an innate passion for knowledge. At this point, Mr. Henderson, who had been paralyzed with shock, saw a fleeting chance to insert himself back into the narrative, to somehow salvage the situation and regain control. He scurried forward, his face contorted into a mask of obsequious solemnity, his eyes darting nervously between the Sheikh and Kimberly. Your Excellency, this is a miracle, a truly historic moment, a discovery of immense importance. The owner of this establishment had absolutely no idea of the painting's true significance. I assure you, he will be honored, truly honored, to learn of its remarkable heritage. We must, of course, arrange for its immediate return to you and your family. Consider it a gift, a humble apology for our ignorance. The Sheikh raised a single, calm hand, silencing Henderson's pathetic torrent of words abruptly. He did not even honor the manager with a glance. His focus, absolute and unbroken, remained solely on Kimberly. Art is not a gift to be bartered for favor, Henderson, the Sheikh said, his voice dropping into a register of cold steel, devoid of any warmth or emotion. I will pay the owner a sum that reflects its immense value, both artistic and historical, a fair price for a priceless masterpiece. That is a simple business transaction. He then took a step closer to Kimberly, his expression softening once more, his eyes filled with genuine admiration and respect. The more important matter is addressing a great injustice. Kimberly looked at him, confused. An injustice, sir? Yes, an injustice, he said with unwavering conviction. That a mind like yours, a passion as fierce as the sea in this painting, should be confined to this life, a life that does not allow you to fully realize your potential. That is the injustice that must be rectified. This world is full of men like Brian Chen, men of superficial knowledge and immense arrogance, who believe they are entitled to judge and belittle others. But people like you, people who pursue truth for its own sake in quiet corners, without any hope of reward, people who value knowledge and understanding above all else, you are the true curators of our culture, the guardians of our heritage. You are rarer and more valuable than any painting, and your talents should be nurtured and celebrated. He reached into his jacket and retrieved a slim platinum card case, the metal gleaming in the soft light of the restaurant. He opened it with a practiced flick of his wrist and presented a card to her, holding it out with a sense of formality and respect. I am the chairman of the Al-Hamad Foundation for Arts and Antiquities, a philanthropic organization dedicated to the preservation and promotion of cultural heritage. Our entire purpose is to find and nurture talent like yours, to provide opportunities for exceptional individuals to flourish and make their mark on the world. I am offering you a full and unconditional scholarship, Miss Evans, to any university in the world you wish to attend, with no strings attached. Oxford, the Sorbonne, Harvard, you name it. All tuition, all living expenses, all research grants will be provided for you to pursue your studies to their highest possible level, with our full support. Kimberly stared at the card, her eyes fixed on the elegant embossed script, the words swimming before her in a blur of disbelief. Scholarship, university, the words echoed in her mind, impossibly real. The dream she had buried deep down, the dream she had long ago abandoned under a crushing mountain of debt and despair, was suddenly being handed to her on a silver platter, a lifeline thrown to her in the midst of a storm. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring the impossible sight, making it hard to focus. But that, the Sheikh said, his voice gentle and reassuring, is only the beginning, the first step on a long and rewarding journey. Education is a journey, not a destination, a process of continuous learning and growth. When you have completed your doctorate, however many years that takes, there will be a position waiting for you, a permanent position with the Al-Hamad Foundation. I need a new chief curator for my family's private collection in Geneva, Switzerland, one of the most significant private collections of art and antiquities in the world, spanning centuries and continents. I need someone with your eye, your soul, and your unwavering integrity. Someone who understands that a masterpiece is not just an investment or a status symbol, but a story that must be told, a legacy that must be preserved. This time, Kimberly could not contain it any longer. A sob escaped her lips, a sound of shock, of disbelief, of a lifetime of quiet yearning being answered in a single, overwhelming moment. The life he was describing was not one she had even dared to dream of, a world beyond her wildest imaginings. It was a fairy tale come true, a Cinderella story for the 21st century. She could only nod, speechless with emotion, the tears now flowing freely down her face, washing away the years of exhaustion, indignity, and unfulfilled potential. She reached out with a trembling hand and took the card, her fingers brushing against his. It felt as heavy as a gold bar, a tangible key to a new universe, a passport to a life of purpose and fulfillment. The Sheikh gave her a warm, respectful smile, a look of genuine encouragement and belief in her abilities. My personal assistant's contact information is on that card, along with my direct line. He will handle everything, from your resignation here to your enrollment at the university of your choice. Your new life begins tomorrow. He then turned his cool, unwavering gaze to the petrified Mr. Henderson, who was still standing there, speechless with shock and apprehension. And please see to it that Miss Evans is paid for her full shift tonight, along with a month's severance. Her employment here is, of course, immediately and permanently concluded, effective immediately. With a final, meaningful nod to Kimberly, a nod between peers, recognizing her as an equal in intellect and passion, Sheikh Khalid Al-Hamid and his associates turned and walked out of the Gilded Lantern, leaving a wake of stunned silence and a transformed life in their wake. For a moment, no one moved, as if they were all frozen in time, unable to process the incredible events that had just unfolded before them. Then, slowly, the spell broke. An elderly woman from a nearby table stood up and began to applaud, her hands clapping softly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Soon others joined her, one by one, filling the restaurant with a spontaneous, heartfelt ovation. A wave of genuine appreciation washing over the room. It wasn't for the Sheikh or for the painting, although both were worthy of admiration. It was for Kimberly, the quiet waitress who had dared to speak her mind and reveal her hidden talents to the world. She stood in the center of it all, the applause washing over her like a warm shower, the small, heavy card clutched tightly in her hand, a symbol of her newfound freedom and opportunity. She looked one last time at the tempest's fury, the painting that had been a silent backdrop to her years of quiet servitude, a catalyst for her fear and self-doubt, and finally, the instrument of her liberation. It was more than just a masterpiece of paint and canvas. It was a masterpiece of hidden truth, a story of a long-lost ship and a family's enduring legacy, waiting patiently in the shadows for someone with the heart and the knowledge to see it, to understand it, and to share it with the world, just like her. So, a quiet waitress, a scornful millionaire, and a powerful Sheikh walk into a restaurant. It sounds like the beginning of a joke, but it became the story of a lifetime, a testament to the power of knowledge, passion, and the enduring human spirit. Kimberly's story reminds us that worth is not determined by a uniform or a job title, but by the passion and knowledge we cultivate in secret, by the person we choose to be when no one is watching. While Brian Chun saw only a servant, someone beneath his notice, Sheikh Khaled saw a scholar, a kindred spirit. He didn't ask a question to show off his own intelligence or to belittle others. He asked it to find true intelligence in others, to uncover hidden gems and celebrate the power of knowledge. And in doing so, he didn't just recover a lost family treasure. He discovered a priceless one in Kimberly, a woman whose passion and intellect were worth more than any painting. What hidden talents are you nurturing? What passions do you pursue when no one is watching? This story proves that the things we love, the knowledge we gather for its own sake, can become our greatest strength, our greatest asset. Sometimes all it takes is one person, one moment, to change everything, to unlock our potential and set us on a path to a life beyond our wildest dreams. If Kimberly's incredible story moved you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own hidden worth. Someone who needs to be reminded that they are capable of achieving great things. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for more real-life stories that will inspire and amaze you. And tell us in the comments what's your secret passion. What hidden talents are you cultivating in the quiet corners of your life?